Chapter 8 Carnage of the Street 4 minutes after boarding the wagon, Hazel and the others reached the crime scene. The horses moved faster than she had ever seen within the city, and the low number of people in the streets made travel easier. They rode in silence, with Commander Comrier sitting with the driver in order to assess the situation. Alistair's expression changed as they moved, shifting, as if listening to a distant conversation. Then, the wagon stopped. "Shit," she heard Commander Comrier say. They jumped from the wagon and saw 2 other wagons arrive ahead of them. Over 20 soldiers rushed to assume position before the alchemist's monster. They all wore the dark blue brigandine armor of the Evenfall Vigil, and carried crow's beaks, which differed from the armament she saw other guards equipped with. Hazel wasn't certain what she expected to see. A dragon or griffin, perhaps. A manticore also seemed like a possibility, though few lived this far north. Regardless, the monster was none of these. The monster was human. A man, just over 7 feet tall, stood covered in blood some 50 feet before them, a wild grin on his face. She was too far away to see his eyes, but in the relative dark of the street, she noticed his veins appeared bluer than normal, and massive muscles rippled across his body. He watched them without responding, repeatedly smashing his bloody fist into a wall. As Hazel squinted, she realized he was holding something in his gore-covered hand. A human head. Hazel tore her eyes from him to search the rest of the road. 7 massive bloodstains littered the street. Cracked fragments of bone and what she assumed were brains lay trodden over. The stench of refuse and iron permeated the air. She looked at her companions. Alistair glanced from Comrier to the monster and kept his hand hovering over his sword, an expression of desperation on his face. Laura had paled, and all pretense of bravado had disappeared as her jaw set with humorless determination. Llewellyn closed his eyes and appeared calm, although Hazel wasn't sure. "Into position!" Comrier roared. 4 crow's beaks in front of Honric. Hold nets at the ready. Melius and Olesia, perform the Thyrsus maneuver. You 3, bring out the barrels from Wagon 5 for the Naiad. Soldiers fulfilled his orders, running where he ordered. Sergeant Concornis chuckled and swaggered toward the deranged man. A woman with light blue skin and dark blue hair skirted the monster to where the barrels were placed. "Heyo, big and ugly," Concornis called out. "Are you going to keep staring like an idiot, or are you going to show me a good time?" The monster moved his head in the satyr's direction, but continued his repetitive action. A faint, wheezing laugh issued from him. "It's just my luck to fight someone who's as stupid as he looks," the sergeant continued. "I suppose I'll need to be the one to start the dance." Hazel blinked, and the monster had fallen back, as the satyr rammed into his stomach with his horns. At the moment of impact, Melius curled his legs under him and pushed off of him to land on his feet after performing a backward flip. The man rose to his feet slowly, still shaking with silent laughter. Instantly, the man crossed the 20-foot divide between them, matching the satyr's speed. Melius leaped to the wall next to him and off it, as the man's fist crushed the cobblestones. Just as quickly, he smashed the brick wall with his other hand, but narrowly missed his limber opponent. "Oh my, you're more eager than I thought. I guess I'll have to use this after all." Concornis clapped his hands together, and as he drew them apart, a wooden staff topped with a large pine cone appeared. He twirled the staff in his hand and then transferred it to the other. It was an impressive display, but Hazel couldn't help thinking he was showing off. The monster turned his head and bolted at the satyr. Melius dodged nimbly between the hands of the enemy, sticking out his tongue and making crude gestures at the creature. "Enough, Melius!" Commander Comrier shouted. "Bring down the bastard already!" The satyr nodded, and bounced over his opponent's head, rolling into an aerial somersault as he tapped the back of the man with the pinecone tip of his staff. Although the blow appeared light, the man went sprawling, and the impact caused a rush of air that blew Hazel's hair back. The man rose to his feet with a wobble. Foam appeared along the edges of his grinning mouth. "Oh," Concornis said, his smile fading. "You handled the blow from my thyrsus surprisingly well. Suppose I'll just have to hit you a few more times until you're really enjoying yourself." As the satyr dashed at his opponent, the other soldiers moved into a practiced formation. 4 soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder in front of Ellen Honrick, with the spear points of their crow's beaks leveled at the monster, waiting. The magician muttered words under her breath and closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked at Comrier and shook her head. "Damn," he muttered. "That would have made matters simpler." Elysia, the naiad with blue hair and skin, gestured at the barrels, and water burst out, following her every motion. The stream coiled around her as she held her position. Concornis struck twice more with his thyrsus, and after each, the creature staggered more and struggled to move in a straight line. The monster retained his speed, but his inability to maintain balance made his alacrity a greater detriment than an asset. Honrick stared at the monster and gestured at the air and intoned, "Bane and pain are all you'll see, so long as you shall gaze on me." Twin beads of red shot from her hand and into the eyes of the monster. The creature shook its head and glowered at Honrick, with radiant crimson eyes. The moment she uttered the spell, the naiad sprayed water along the street, which immediately hardened into ice. The crazed man rushed at the mage, but his lack of coordination and the frozen ground caused the monster to fall forward and slide across the ice, which curved as the naiad directed, to the armed soldiers. The ice instantly melted and reformed around the creature, freezing him in a solid block. 4 soldiers lunged forward as Honrick and the other 4 backed away. They threw a large net woven with several small black stones over the monster, each covering part of his body to the best of their abilities. Honrick touched the net and whispered as light spread across the surface and the ice burst. The monster had broken out. Honrick retreated a few steps, but showed no pain from the shower of ice shards. The monster gyrated on the ground, but the net kept him down. Again he spasmed, but the net moved hardly an inch. Commander Comrier approached and examined the net. When he was satisfied, he nodded to the 4 who were defending Honrick. "Get to work, but avoid the net." The men nodded and repeatedly stabbed the criminal with the spear tips of their crow's beaks. Alistair gaped. "Isn't that a little excessive?" Comrier scoffed. "You have a lot to learn, Prince. Look at the wounds they're inflicting. Does that son of a bitch seem to care?" Hazel peered closer and noticed no blood emerged from the man's body. Each wound closed as soon as the weapon withdrew. "We're not just stabbing him in the middle of the street for fun, vampire. We're doing it so we can transport him back to headquarters for questioning. That potion could last until dawn if we did nothing. The concoctions the alchemist uses increase healing or return the body to a previously healthy state. According to Paxton Averley, they prevent incoming damage from achieving any permanent wound unless parts are removed from the individual. Given that these monsters are strong as an ogre and fast as a sylph, using precise attacks rarely work. Honrick tried to use sorcery, but, like I expected, this guy's mind is so jumbled that she couldn't do anything." "What about the net?" Llewellyn asked. The net uses an enchanted lodestone weave," Honrick answered, joining the commander. "Each of those stones currently weighs 100 pounds. It's one of the few ways we can immobilize them." Lara's eyebrows shot up. 100 each? There's a stone in every knot. How isn't he crushed to death?" "We've tried using 50 weights," Honrick replied, shaking her head. "But the last time we tried it, the criminal nearly broke free. It took some creative thinking to survive that night." A soldier ran up and saluted Comrier. Sir, how would you like us to handle the fallen? Gather as much as you can into piles. Keep any badges you find with the bodies for identification. I'll see if I can get some wizards to reconstruct their bodies so they can have a decent burial. Comrier sighed and ran a hand through his head. He turned to Lara with tired eyes. Well, did you have fun? No one answered. Tonight, I get to tell several families their beloved sons, husbands, and fathers are never coming home. The bloody pulp you see used to be good soldiers. Now they're gone. He shook his head, his voice still quiet. Go home. Meet with the foreman in the morning. Enjoy life while you have it. You're dismissed. Cormier turned from them and barked orders as Hazel and the others departed in silence. They were as quiet as the streets they traveled for the next 10 minutes. Hazel understood the bleak and emotional scene, and yet could not connect to it. She remained respectfully silent for her allies. It occurs to me, Llewellyn said softly, that I don't know where the construction site of the fourth wall is. Do any of you? Lara winced and looked at Alistair. The vampire sighed. Perhaps. I took a tour of the wall one night out of curiosity. I'm not certain, but I may know where the current construction site is. When I spoke with His Majesty, he mentioned the workers required a significant amount of oversight, even if they were highly efficient. Still, it isn't especially helpful for me to know, since I won't be going with you tomorrow. Good point, Lara said. Hazel, have you been out there? No, I'm afraid not. My house is in the southern part of the city. The construction site is a few miles to the north. I only know about it from my parents and school. Lara bit her lip and turned back to Alistair. Could you show me on a map? Yes, I can do that. I might suggest leaving earlier than necessary if you're uncertain where to go. I'm not too worried, Lara said, looking much relieved. I've got great instincts about these things. Should we determine who will go tomorrow? Llewellyn asked before Alistair could reply. I know little about vampire physiology, but you stated attending was impossible. Are you weakened by the sun as well, werewolf? Not really. I'm not as strong as I am in nighttime, and I can't turn into a wolf during the day, but otherwise I'm good to go. I'm pretty formidable at any time. And you, Hazel? Me? Yes, Llewellyn said mildly. I assumed our group was selected in part because of our peak performance at night. Are you weakened during the day? No, no more than usual. I'm not even sure I would know how to tell. I guess the only issue I have is I try not to be seen during the day. But besides that, I have no problems with sunlight. What about you, Llewellyn? I'm stronger at nighttime, but I have no other problems with daylight, except for being noticed by others. There is a reasonable distrust of dark elves anywhere humans dwell. This city is hardly an exception. I can join you two at the wall. I'm curious to see what sort of magic may have been happening there. Okay, so it's everybody except for you, Your Highness, Lara said with a smirk. We'll try not to have too much fun without you. I'm sure you will, Alistair replied dryly. But more seriously, I'm disappointed with our assignment. Even after everything we saw, I think we could do more. I hate to agree with you, but I do, Lara said. Honestly, if I would have known we'd be doing boring stuff like checking construction sites, I would have stuck around my old place and kept fighting. They're right to distrust us, Llewellyn said. Lara scoffed. Oh, really? And why shouldn't they trust us? We haven't done anything wrong. That may be true, but we've done nothing right either, Llewellyn replied with a shrug. Each of us are members purely based on recommendation. Not a century ago, vampires and therianthropes destroyed many towns and killed thousands of people. Both groups have made reparations, and neither were entirely responsible for their actions, but there are still many humans who distrust the predatory nature of your races. As for warlocks and dark elves, both live to the far north of Eliara in the territory of the Unseelie Court, and savor the destruction and manipulation of humanity. And you, Hazel, Llewellyn continued, looking at her, are little more than a child in the eyes of the guards. A child who has never been trained in combat, and whose origins are, I'm guessing, unknown. Hazel frowned. But I am an adult. I'm 16. He shrugged again. I doubt the commander cares in the slightest. Now hold on, Alistair said. His Majesty himself recommended each of us. How can you say he would be less than reliable? Does his word mean nothing to his own soldiers? Llewellyn glanced at Alistair, then ahead. I know of the interactions between Aldrich and the Seelie court. The King of Athelion is unique among rulers for following his intuition. It's because of those impulses the peace treaties with Eliara have been successful. Judging from the office we left and the battle we witnessed, I suspect the Evenfall Vigil functions on a limited budget, despite the increase in superhuman crime. This city sits on a well of arcane energy, and so anything that wished to attain greater magic would be drawn here. Those things are now causing destruction and chaos at night, and the commander's soldiers are dying or getting injured beyond his ability to do anything more than reallocate insufficient funds to protecting them. He continued forward, almost talking to himself. Finally, when the king does something, he sends a group of beings who represent many of the threats they combat. None are trained. They receive their own special treatment. They cannot be terminated from the organization, and the commander is still responsible for their actions. The most reasonable course of action is to put us aside and hope we aren't as terrible as he believes. They walked in silence until they reached the library, contemplating Llewellyn's words. While the dark elf spoke with soothing impassivity, his words unsettled them. The temporary escape from thoughts of the bloodbath they witnessed were replaced by musings on their inability to do anything meaningful for the Evenfall Vigil. Hazel sat up late into the night, considering what had happened while contemplating the future.